justice issue, human dignity. To what extent should we have a control over technology, control of technology, and some other such issues. So these are issues that are common with some of the bioethics issues that we had raised before. However, I can also tell you what other issues, something that I was not able to discuss in the last class, and actually allow you to, yeah, with regard to the ethical concerns in bioethics areas, they are the same, almost the same thing, except that you had an issue regarding paternalism, but that is more or less attached with the idea of autonomy. So if you have a question regarding how paternalism relates to autonomy, maybe we can come back at the end of the class. Just remind me. Okay, so I really don't want to go into the details of this one. If you read the reading number 5, you will get to understand everything that you need to know about much of what we are doing today. I will sidestep this particular reading, flagging at the same time that this is an important one, and I will go on to discuss with you something related to artificial intelligence, because that has caught a large amount of interest amongst humans as to what is artificial intelligence and so on, and what are its deep ethical implications in the short term and also in the long term. So at one level, we think that artificial intelligence is some sort of a software, or maybe we could say a computer program with a mechanism to learn. And when it learns, it then uses that knowledge to make a decision in a new situation, much like what humans do. So the researchers who try to build this software try to write maybe a code that can read images, text, video, audio, and learn something from it. Once a machine has learned something like this, that knowledge can be put to use elsewhere or somewhere else. Now, artificial intelligence and its has spread in its popularity, and now we are told that it permeates every aspect of our lives. There are critical areas, like for instance, healthcare, where we are now needing the help of artificial intelligence for medical diagnosis, for instance. And many places and some hospitals have also are thinking very seriously, and in fact the old age homes also are thinking very seriously of introducing what you call care bots, or those robots that give care. So care bots are a new species of AI devices. So, there is a lot of an overlap between robotics and artificial intelligence. Not all of robotics is, of course, AI. There was a primordial robotics, but we are not talking about the advanced robotics, which more or less resembles the framework offered by AI or artificial intelligence. So the care bots are something that has caught the fancy and the imagination of people in old age homes, where people can't take care of themselves, or patients in hospitals who need critical care and who are suffering from a certain kind of a disease, whereby they have lost a memory to program their everyday actions in such a way that they can they simply can't carry them out on their own. So they need a little bit of that prodding or a nudging by a care bot to take medicines on time or to take care of themselves and so on. Artificial intelligence are not just confined to critical areas. There are other kinds of uses. For instance, at some point of time, it might become very useful if, let us imagine an area that has been where some mines have been hidden, where if humans step, then they're going to blow them off. And in order to clean an area, at times we need the help of some such robots, and which will clean an area and will ensure uh, no harm to any humans around. So these are some of the, or for instance, if you can understand that if there is a flooding inside a mine, a coal mine or something like that, it's very difficult to rescue. And in fact, in some of these rescue missions, it is very dangerous to employ humans to carry out the rescue work. And some of these AI devices can be used on rescue missions, which are very dangerous otherwise for humans. So these are also some other critical areas. Two, very mundane ones like domestic chores and companion. Artificial intelligence is also used in stock markets, insurance, and of course you have heard about this. The driverless cars, so cars without drivers. It is also being used a little bit on criminal justice system in the U.S., for instance, where you have a lot of you process a lot of data by access to a certain kind of an algorithmic logic, and through that you tend to figure out as to in which cases must the judge give parole to someone or sentence someone in a certain way. And these because of the data that you have collected, you can, with some degree of accuracy, you could predict, depending on what the background of a particular or a potential criminal is, how likely that person is either going to jump parole or is going to commit another crime in future, and so on. So criminal justice system finds AI very attractive, though it has its problem areas, and we will come to that. So, for instance, one big problem area is that people have worried that artificial intelligence does a certain kind of a racial stereotyping. We will come to that later. It also has military uses, for instance, in autonomous weapon systems, and as in science fiction, for instance, people at times wonder, and this is likely to happen. So yesterday's science fiction is today's reality. In that sense, we can say, we could claim with a certain degree of confidence that the future wars could be fought between robots of two different countries or robots of two different enemies and whatever. Artificial intelligence does a lot of surveillance, of course, through the facial recognition system that have been put in place in many areas. And your reading number 5 gives you enough illustrations of that. And the facial recognition system is becoming more and more sophisticated. So most of us do not realize that So in that reading, we have an example of the Samsung TV. So while it is on, it is listening to all the informal conversations that is taking place. Or for instance, on your Google, you have Alexa and others who are also snooping into your everyday conversations. So the in a way, surveillance is of such a nature that the dividing line between the private and the public is disappearing. It's also used, artificial intelligence could be used for translation, for speech recognition, and these are some of the useful ones. But but these are the different and the many ways through which there has been a kind of a spread of artificial intelligence. It's called, the new technologies have developed in such a way that in the older, in the first industrial revolution, one of the biggest inventions was electricity, and electricity changed, the face of technology. It revolutionized technology. Something similar is going to happen with artificial intelligence. It's going to be, you might call it the new electricity of the fourth industrial revolution, so to say. So, and yet, when we talk about artificial intelligence and how it is going to be the new electricity, we also need to know that we need sufficient data, and data is critical to artificial intelligence. And the accumulation of data goes beyond mere programming to enabling machines to learn new things, and that is called machine learning. And machine learning is another way where we can say that some AI devices can be made ethically sensitive and can be ethically programmed. So machines can also learn, for instance, the care bots, how to have empathy in a certain situation. You could make some of the machines learn them by repeated or iterated experiments made on some of those machines. And you could, for instance, tell a very sophisticated machine and present a certain kind of a thought experiment or a certain kind of a cue to the machine, saying that if this and this happens, if a patient has not woken up for a little longer and has slept for an unusual amount of time, what should you do? So, and then the robot can give a few answers based on his or her, learning. But then they can be subsequently made to learn a few more things, and that can happen through the iterated process of making them learn by either machines or doctors, or even those who are at the receiving end of caregiving. That is also by inmates, let us say, of an old age home, so to say. But and with regard to the doubt that we had about surveillance, at times there is a danger. So of these machines knowing a lot and learning a lot about us, to the extent that we could claim that Siri and Alexa know much more about us than the people who are closest to us, probably. And this has not yet happened to many of us, or so we want to believe. But this is very likely to happen sometime in the near future. So where some of these devices would get to know more about us and can also predict our next line of behavior in many ways. So what we are trying to look at, and if you take a deterministic model of technology, a deterministic model of technology says, and this is something that we had discussed in the last class, that scientific and technological developments will take place inevitably. So there is a certain inevitability about technological advancement. You can't stop them. And so when this is bound to happen, and so in other words, when we talk about the determinism of science and technology, what we're trying to say is that there is something inbuilt dynamic within the framework itself. It is much like a dialectics, where one step leads to the next step, and then the next step leads you to several other subsequent steps, and it's unstoppable. It is inevitable. So it is inevitable, and you just can't stop it at any point of time, and this has to happen. So there is a limit to what human will can do to check technological progress. So if we take that as one of the building blocks of assessing what kind of ethical impact are we going to study, then we first have to accept that many of these technological advances are a sort of a mixed blessing, where there are certain merits and some demerits, and one of the biggest merit is that some dangerous tasks are made simple by artificial intelligence. Medical diagnosis is one such area, by the way, which will significantly profit from this, or even weather forecasting, for instance, where we wish to alert ourselves of impending disasters. Now, of course, meteorological data and science is much more advanced, and we are able to predict many of these. What if artificial intelligence were also used to predict accurately as to when the next pandemic is going to happen, so to say? And that's not impossible, by the way. Because if an artificial intelligence, if you are gathering data, then you're gathering a lot of that data. And if in a particular locality, let us say, people are suffering from flu-like symptoms, then there will be a lot of Google search about fever, cough, and all those things. And an AI that is trained to pick up some of these kind of searches can then say that something is happening wrong here, that more and more people are going on searching about these things. And using a map of that search, it can then predict in which directions this kind of search is moving, and then somewhere model it on the basis of what kind of pandemic is likely to happen, what has been the past of this particular locality, when was the last epidemic or something like that happened in this particular place, and so on. It also opens up, beyond medical diagnosis, weather forecasting, or even trying its basis for having a predictive modeling of pandemics or epidemics. It can also serve as opportunities for entrepreneurs, for businesses, and so on. Usually one of the biggest demerit that we have heard of artificial intelligence is that it leads to loss of jobs, some say, because artificial intelligence doesn't come alone. It usually comes along with a certain kind of a very super refined automation processes. So there are automation processes, and they are happening in many of the factories around the world. And artificial intelligence and robots are used to make the process of automation even more complex and much more efficient. And as a result of which, we think that this is going to lead to a certain loss of jobs. And this is something important. Let us come back to this later on. And so what is going to be the ethical impact of this? How must we try to then address the whole problem of this one? That is, what if artificial intelligence leads to tremendous loss of jobs? What happens in that society, and so on? So weaponization is another problem with artificial intelligence. That is, those that are associated with not only with automated weapon system, but also with drones and drone warfare, which are partially belong to the automated weapon system, and other kind of threats, because many of these machines or automated weapon system are only programmed for certain goals. What if they miss out? So at times it is very difficult to recall those machines once the command has been given, and so they will just more likely carry it out. And on the other hand, they are not accountable to anyone, and that is another cause for worry. So unlike humans, so even if we are programmed to act like soldiers, at least there is a certain kind of an accountability. We could be put in a, what is it you call in the military? Anyway, I just missed that particular word. Yeah, court-martial. We could be court-martialed in if we have acted in transgressing either the norms of warfare and so on. So there is a certain kind of a court-martial, but court-martial is more like making soldiers accountable for their acts of omission or commission or whatever. But there can't be any court-martial of these. So the other downside is that it's going to, and this is one of the more worrying parts is this, that AI would lead towards making our lives a lot lonelier. It would dehumanize life itself. It will significantly alter our understanding of what the human condition is all going to be. And there's going to be a great, huge loss of privacy, by the way, whether Western or non-Western. And here, in contrast to anybody who would claim that loss of privacy is more or less a Western preoccupation, I would say that what about China? And China's digital dictatorship is something that, I don't know, I can send you that particular chapter, that particular article on China's digital dictatorship that I had downloaded from the Economist journal magazine, and I can share it with you. Yeah, I'll just make a note of this so that I don't forget. So this is very interesting. And what that particular article was trying to suggest and say, and something that we think is actually happening in China, and could be happening elsewhere, for instance, we don't know. Maybe Russia, for instance, is another very strong candidate for undertaking these kind of surveillance through face recognition technologies. So it is believed, and probably it will be correct to say, that the Chinese authorities have an eye on everyone, and not only those who exist within China, but anybody who travels to China. And for all that it matters, probably they are surveilling on anyone. I mean, it's a little worrying, to think about these things, that you are, even as you talk and lead a normal life, you are being surveilled in a way. So in China, so what happens is that in every, in any remote corner of a street, you could have one of the small little cameras lodged in a place where you would never know that they have been lodged. And as people pass, so it will read the faces, and then there will be some kind of, an irritation that takes place, and on the back end of it. And then through the facial recognition technology, it will make out so where you were at a certain point of time, and then AI will complete the whole task of where have you been all, and so and then it will give a certain kind of a continuum to the movement of a particular face whose identity has already been revealed, to suggest what kind of sort of activities that the person may have engaged in the last 10 days or 15 days or a month. Who has the person met? What has the person bought? Where has he gone? And all those things. And so this sort of a loss of privacy is something that we are all worried about. And most of the, why? Just talk about China. The ways in which we are using some of the apps which require us to give them consent to look at what else we are doing inside our smartphone is, or even on the laptops and all that. The Google search engine, for instance, is the biggest snooper on our lives. So this is happening to us imperceptibly. However, we console ourselves to think that much of the data that they gather only probably makes sense to the commercial interests of a few capitalists, or to the big business in some ways. Probably nobody wants to know, or one might want to think, what kind of private conversations I have with whom and why, and those kind of things. But that is what we kid ourselves to believe. Probably it is doing all of that, and yet it doesn't find it of interest, so it moves on to other things and snoops on us. Now, the ways in which technology itself is deterministic, we could say that to some extent, a lot of scientists and people at the edge of the science and technology might just snap back at you and say that this is technology, stupid. What kind of ethics are you talking about? Humans are free to do their own ethics and have their, but there's a certain kind of a life beyond human life, and the life that is now taken up by technology, for instance. However, we also know that a lot has actually been changing, even with regard to what kind of bots are coming in place of. So there is a new set of bots that we know that have come up. One, what we call the companion bots. They give you company, and they also have a tremendous ability to understand human emotions and they relate to you. Um, and they uh, they they bring about a certain kind of a blurring between humans and machines. So, in contrast to whatever scientists were earlier saying, that this is one area that can be controlled, and so what technology must do is to just act as tools of humans. But somewhere we are thinking that two things are happening. The distinction between human and machine is gradually blurring, and at the same time, they are no longer our tools, probably in the future. And if you have to believe by what is understood as super intelligence, for instance, if that is to be believed, and I'll come to that in a moment, then humans are very likely, and this could be part of the science fiction, but it's very likely in the future could be controlled by some of these machines, which have become super, super smart. Because by virtue of being super intelligent, they have become super smart. So the human-machine relationship is getting blurred, where machines are supposed to become more and more emotional, and they can double up as companion bots. And already some manufacturers have started producing some of these companion bots. And if we say that people's lives are becoming lonelier, some lonely lives might actually fall upon having a companion bot. And of course, if you need a partner, and there is no possibility of ever having a fight with a companion bot as we do with humans, so we can say that, okay, so no fights with anyone, and I can lead as per. So basically, now the next question that might arise in your mind is then are we talking about a companion bot or a slave bot? Well, it can differ, but at least you have somebody who's around to console you and all that. I mean, this is not very much around the horizon, but it is a possibility. Now, if this possibility were to come about, where the distinction between human and machines are going to blur, or that divide is going to go, then it means that we are rethinking some of the traditional ethical questions, or frameworks. So we can't be, so we need a new ethical framework. The older ethical framework will put the humans at the center. Now there are very many problems with that. So we see that it leads to a certain kind of a problem with regard to environment. So where we'll see that the humans must be at the center, and so that was the traditional utilitarian calculus that we use, machines as means, and that we control everything else, and most of these machines act at our behest. Now there is something undesirable about it with regard to environment, but there is something inevitable about machines no longer behaving as machines, as means, is something that is born forth by the new advances in our science and technology. So, we could think of humanoids at times, much like the companion bots, but a more advanced form with soft emotions and some kind of a moral judgment. So if you have been programmed with a lot of algorithms, call them accurate, and some of that algorithmic, there is no bias in that kind of an algorithm, then we can think of humanoids with soft emotions, with some kind of a moral judgment, based on a lot of data, might actually behave much better than humans at times, and we don't know. And And some of these humanoids or some of these AI devices in its most sophisticated versions might end up as being artificial ethical agents. So all this while we had thought that only human beings can become ethical agents. Now we are reconciled to the idea that once you have such an advanced way of understanding what machines can become in terms of aping the humans and at times having the softer and the better side of humans more adapted to machines, we can end up with by treating machines as artificial ethical agents, which is why there is a little bit of research that goes on within AI circles on the rights that robots have. So what kind of rights must robots have, and why it is important that we extend a set of rights that both humans enjoy also to robots. Okay, now let me tell you. Okay, so and then besides humanoids, we also have another term coming up, and that is called cyborg. A cyborg is so humanoid is more like from the other side, and a cyborg is from the human side, a human being that has some artificial implants or appendages. So our brains could be perfected. And so if you go by, so it is not genetic engineering where we are trying to, it is not genetic engineering where you're trying to design the future race in certain way. Here we are talking about redesigning ourselves with all our imperfections intact, and then we are trying to redesign ourselves in such a way that we get rid of our certain imperfections, and our minds are much more alert. We implant certain things, some neurons maybe, in our bodies, and some of those neural networks, artificial neural networks that we implant in our bodies, can then be connected with some of the machines, and then we could act like cyborgs, and you must have seen movies such as this. So, what is superintelligence? Superintelligence is that it's kind of an intelligence that outperforms even the best of the human brain, and including its potential for creativity and so on. So some believe that superintelligence or superintelligent machines could be the last inventions humans will ever need. Because once we produce these, they will reproduce themselves with or without our help. And once they start doing it, there is a worry, as I told earlier, of these machines then ruling the rest of us. So I want to point out to another area that must have interested you as yeah, give me a second. Another area that must have interested you as students of political theory, if you recall in the first semester itself, you had somewhere spoken about human judgment as such. Oh, sorry, political judgment and its place in political theory. Now, apply that model to what is going to happen with the encroachment of big data, biometrics, artificial intelligence, super intelligence, and so on. What area of human reflection now is left undisturbed with these new inventions? And what will be the fate of what we call moral judgment that humans have? Now, there is no straight answer. For anything that humans might argue on behalf of moral judgment as a typical human exercise, with a little bit of that intuitions, machines can say, oh, we have learned enough from you, and we can be super intuitive compared to humans. And we can marshal all those intuitions that you have, and we can have. And the better part is that many of the humans actually make judgments based on incomplete or uncertain data and facts, whereas this is not going to be the case with machines. And so we are going to have full access to all the data, to all the facts, and then on the basis of which we can take a much better, we can make a much better judgment, as it is done, for instance, as it is being done in the criminal justice system in the United States, for instance. So that leaves us a little a little poorer in terms of in terms of what our judgment is going to be like. So yes, so one of the main quote I wanted to bring out is that. And this is going to be significant for your understanding as well as for your preparation for the end semester exams. And this is something I read out as a quote. Will emerging technologies, including IT, artificial intelligence, robotics, nanotechnology, genetic engineering, and synthetic biology, serve as guardian angels, or are they devils in disguise? Now, that is too stark a contrast between being guardian angels and being devils in disguise. We know that somewhere they fall in between. If they fall in between, what must our next step of ethical assessment of these risky and the frontline technologies must be, is the question that we need to ask ourselves. So some worry that we are on the brink of what is called a post-human future. And when our lives are going to be, and if genetic engineering is any guide, and if artificial intelligence is another guide, then our lives might, somebody claims it, and this is a quote I give by Bill McKibben, who says that our lives are going to be a tangle of genes or chips. So our lives are going to be a tangle of genes or chips, or maybe both together, and that is what. Human meaning might become very fragile, and our judgments might suffer, and that we are. So that is the pessimistic view in some ways. However, there are other concerns that we have right now, and so that's the long-term thing that we're looking at, that how artificial intelligence is in some ways leading us towards, in a deterministic manner, towards a post-humanist future with all its risks, and risks to the extent of robbing us of our comfort zones, including our own ethical frameworks, and displacing us from the center of ethical frameworks. So machines, either cloaked as humanoids, or we marching up to them as cyborgs, the gap is closing, and the new ways in which there is more intimate interactions and connectivity between neural networks of machines and human beings might give a new kind of a view about who the new ethical agent is going to be in course of time. However, as of now, there are more immediate worries to be taken care of. And if you actually apply the Collingridge dilemma here, then we don't know when to intervene. So in the short term, we don't know what the ethical impact of a technology. We'd like to believe, and as whenever a new technology comes up, there is usually a certain kind of an optimism or euphoria. Oh, this is going to save us from these mining operations, from wars, and all those dangerous occupations that humans ought not to do. And so it's a life savior, we can say. And we can say, yeah, 3 cheers for this kind of a life savior technology. But the Collingridge dilemma doesn't, as the Collingridge dilemma says, there are no ways in which we know what the ethical dilemmas at the beginning of the technology is, and then towards the close, when we know many things have happened, there is already a pacing problem, and so we can't any longer control it, and then we leave ourselves at the we leave ourselves at the mercy of this advanced technology that has already started shaping our lives, and then we can say, okay, let us go for a middle of the road ethical approach here. So ethical risk, ethical assessment are going to be very significant in the years to come. And that is one of the main reasons why I designed this course specifically for you. And you can go into depths into any of these areas and do your own readings on this, is because we need new experts. And you should be looking at this, exploring these new avenues for further reading and research, and which will give you. So I'm a little disappointed by the fact that many of you chose not to do the group projects. And I was very disappointed by that, because that would have been a great opportunity for some of you to come together, do some collaborative work on a particular topic, and then come up with some finding which would have been, seen the light of the day, and you could have been the cutting edge experts on those areas. But anyway, so let me now go through some of these chats. I haven't looked at the chat so far, and yeah. Okay. So, Devesh, you have already recorded, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. So do share with me whenever you're done. And so, okay, so I begin with Sarvesh Pandey. Sir, a lot of big industrialists are planning to use robots after COVID-19 crisis. Do you think it will impact the employment even more? Do you think it is ethical? These industrials claim efficiency of these robots even during these industrials claim efficiency of these robots even during pandemics. Well, I mean, we know that the robots are the safest thing to be used in many of these hospitals, and some have, and you must have seen pictures of those. And almost all of us wish that the precious lives of some of these doctors and nurses could be saved with some of these usual run-of-the-mill kind of jobs that robots could do instead of. So the doctors could be spared for their intervention only in very critical areas, and leave the rest of the usual stuff to be done by the robots. Yes. So yes, I'm like, why not? I mean, it will lead to more of unemployment. Whether or not it is ethical, well, what is ethical today might become unethical tomorrow, or what is unethical today. So there are always this, what if our society goes for guaranteeing a certain kind of a basic income for all? Then in that case, we can say, and that is where I think many of our societies are headed, not in a socialist manner, so to say, but once we guarantee everybody a basic income, probably people wouldn't face the same kind of problem that migrant laborers faced when they were fleeing the metro cities and all of that. But if you have a basic income, then people can say that, okay, I'm assured of it. Some of my basic needs being satisfied with the help of my basic income. Beyond that, whether or not I get employment or whether I enjoy a certain amount of leisure with the kind of help that I get from these robots is another thing to think about. And some governments might just go that way, saying that, okay, so we can't assure you of jobs and employment, but we can assure you of a basic income, and be happy with that. So we could be moving in that direction, but when, we do not exactly know. But some of these fears of unemployment are real, but they're also much more magnified than they ought to be at this point of time. I still think that there is a way in which we can control the situation if social scientists like you and me need to speak a lot about what must be the appropriate public policies. Unfortunately, we don't. Most of us who do or teach or research public policy are, are trapped in an age-old framework where we are still talking about a distribution of this resource or that resource. Unfortunately, we are unable to predict what's going to happen in terms of what kind of job losses might either because of automation or artificial intelligence, which many European countries are doing much better than what we are doing. And that is one of the reasons why we should be a little smarter in this activity. Purnima has this question, has this kind of a comment. Elon Musk has advised strictly against advanced artificial intelligence already, but people think it's unwise. Yes, Elon Musk has already advised strictly against advanced AI, but Elon Musk is also another person. I mean, he's a showman of sorts, and he has also said that there are certain ways in which we could implant some neurons into our brains, and that could be connected to the machines and all of that. So even if he has advised us strictly against advanced artificial intelligence, probably he's responding to the future crisis that is bound to be imminent. But if it is not Elon Musk himself, but it will be Elon Musks of the future who will profit more from this advanced AI, if it ever happens, believe me. Pragya, sir, will advancement in AI affect or change the definitions of virtues and values like justice, etc.? Well, it is sure to, because if you go back into the kind of that machine-human divide that we had looked at so far, and even, with that divide remaining intact, yes, some of these virtues and values will be never remain the same. And if you go by one of the initial understanding we had in political theory is that values keep changing because the world keeps changing, our politics keep changing, our values must also keep pace with that. So some of these will change, though they will not be replaced by something. So justice will still remain a justice in a continually unjust world. So as long as there is injustice, there will always be scope and room for justice, though the parameters of how do we understand justice, how do we measure it, how do we implement it, are all going to for a change. Yes, Alibaba in China is doing that, sir. Yes, I know. Deepika, using of many robots in future will lead to unemployment growth, and it's unethical. So is there any solution for this so that we can use robots and unemployment growth rate is also stopped? Yeah, that is the biggest concern for a country like India, where you have like 1.3 to 1.4 billion people, and if you have these artificial intelligence, not immediately, but in another 30-40 years, and especially in the Indian case, what happens is that a very high percentage of our population are actually young. So people like you and the future generation are going to be hit hard by this. And so we will somewhere have to make a balance between these two concerns of providing employment to everyone and also ensuring that we are not robbed of the frontiers of technological revolution. But that requires a certain kind of a very skillful human intervention to bring about the necessary balance between these two objectives. Saptaparni Banerjee, yes, one of the limits of AI can be hacking of AI, means and machines like pacemakers. Yes, of course, yes. And one of your readings actually tells you in what ways they can be hacked and what are the dangers that exist. So besides the fact that these AI systems themselves are built on certain biases, stereotypes, and all those things, there is a further danger of these being hacked and being used by someone else. So hacking is going to become more and more prominent, much more sophisticated and refined in the years to come, because and especially of AI systems. So AI systems will be hacked. Let's say China would have a great interest in understanding what the frontiers of research in India is, or the US might be interested, or US might also actually be hacking for all we know. Russia has been doing it for a long time. China has been doing it, and who knows? Actually, India might also be doing it. So we don't really know. So either way, it's going to be a big challenge to all of us. India is moving fast towards surveillance with facial recognition, Arogya app, and a lot more. What can be its political, social impacts? Well, a lot of that is already happening. And the whole thing began with the Aadhaar card and the ways in which there is a certain surveillance going along with the Aadhaar cards, and how we risk or the system risks losing all of that data to an unethical private player who can then use it up in different ways. And so, Arogya app, yes, there is also lately some kind of discussion on that as well. I don't know how many of you. I have installed Arogya app, chiefly because it doesn't ask to access too many things in my smartphone, unlike other apps that I have. And given that the government thinks that the app will become dysfunctional after a while, but by then anybody can argue it would have collected a lot of data from people as to what are the other apps they use, what kind of so there's bound to be so there's a certain kind of a political surveillance that goes along with these kinds of things, with facial recognition systems and all of that. Uh, but if these might become very, 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 very dangerous in years to come. So I agree with you, Anjali, that we are fast moving towards a kind of a very sophisticated, complex modes of surveillance that are becoming a reality today. Himansu, how do you see the development of surveillance regime in contradiction with the liberal democratic global order, which guarantees for a minimalist state, while at the same time peeping into the most private spaces? Well, our own understanding of liberal democracy itself is changing, Himansu. And so, well, I mean, there is a contradiction. And the fact that we are able to state this contradiction, we need to congratulate ourselves that we have understood. So, as democratic subjects, we have become so advanced that we are able to see the kind of danger that is coming our way, and how something like this is happening to us. So yes, these are very tangible and good worries. Oh yeah, we have a few more. Yeah, but I must repeat myself. What I did in the last class is that, well, I'm really, again, once again, very, very extremely impressed by the quality of the questions that you keep asking me, and I'm overjoyed to answer some of them. And but towards the end, actually, after I've done the last one, I will go back and answer one of the questions that I thought I would answer in the next class, and that had to do with Sandals' understanding of disability. And so I will come back to that. So I know that I promised you. Nistha Singh, sir, can AI be said to be impacting lives unequally, in the sense that jobs occupied by less educated are more susceptible to be taken by it, taking in context of level of AI development most of the world can afford today, that is replacing people for robots in areas requiring manual work rather than complex decision-making, intellectual work. Yes, but eventually the other one too will also go, Nista. So if one of the most sophisticated work that is done in a society are by judges, and yet the judges' work, if that can be taken up by a little bit of that artificial intelligence, then there is no area of work that is. But yes, you are right about it, that the first thing to go would be the manual jobs. And if you have an insensitive government in place which thinks that the economy matters more than anything else, so let the migrant laborers go back homes, we can have an automation process back in the urban spaces and can redesign our industry in such a way that we have less recourse and less reliance or dependence on manual labor, and let us instead have these robots coming into work for us. So yes, a high possibility. Bharti Dhawan, sir, we have seen China incorporating tech in a lot of things. One of them is robot traffic police, wherein different robots are designed to perform distinct functions. Yes, this in a way can be seen an important intervention in areas of road safety per se. Yes, I agree. This can also help to keep a check on jaywalkers and all those who are not responsible on roads. Also, the robots are on duty 24/7, which can be a limitation for human police patrolling. Yeah, frankly, I completely agree with you, and probably you are one of those few who would take up the issue of jaywalking on the street. And not many people in the country worry about jaywalking. The people think that jaywalking is a matter of right for any person. You can, the vehicles cannot, violate traffic rules, but humans can, and anytime they can. And anybody who is a jaywalker is hit, then the fault lies usually with the driver, not with others. Yes, so yeah, that will be one of the advantages of having this kind of, so yes, this traffic patrolling, for instance, or some kind of an inspection on the traffic lights and all, that will be a good use of AI technologies, given the fact that in India we have so many, but that will also make the traffic policeman's job redundant to some extent. Anushka Parija, while I'm yet to read enough about algorithmic logic, I wonder how pervasive and how harmful algorithmic biases can be in machine learning and in retarding human progress. Yes, it can be, uh, usually what people claim is that the data that we gather is neutral, is just factual, and that the trick is to try amass as much as data as possible. So that's why we call it the problem of the big data. But then the moment we place them within an architecture that then processes them, and the processing of that data through a certain kind of an algorithmic codes would mean that some of those biases that have been latent within the process of data collection itself will continue, and these can be pervasive in the sense that usually just look at some of the survey research that you have done, and or you have participated in. You would find that usually we think that a particular kind of a design of a survey questionnaire has to be such that you need not ask very value-laden questions, that there should be, that there should not be any value-laden questions. You should not be well, someone is yeah, doing the presentation. Yeah, Devesh, or can you please mute that person? Yeah, sorry, I got a little distracted. Yeah, so we collected a lot of this data, and they are processed, and in that act of the processing, some of the biases that have remained. So yes, I was referring to survey data. So there is a certain way in which we construct a survey questionnaire, and most of the time we think that, oh, this is very neutral as it can be. But you look at the ways in which you have framed the questions and the structure, which question leads to which one. You will, if you look at this, show me as a survey questionnaire, and I can tell you what is the implicit ideological bias of a particular survey questionnaire. Right? And it's not, anybody can do that. So the big data is, we could say, is the is the grandfather, let us say, of the survey research or whatever, and is multiplied to 100th power of the same. And so there's a lot of data that have come in. So these kind of biases, now when brought together, they may have some of these. So one of the areas in which ethicists are using this, not just to say that all kind of data that has been collected are useless, but should there not be an ethical intervention to try minimize those kinds of implicit bias that are already part of the data itself. And so if left untouched, this can be very pervasive and can be very harmful, as an answer to you, Anushka. Himanshu, Arogya Setu app asks you to use the data collected in future too. The data collected in future too. Yes, it does. I'm yet to know, what kind of, more research needs to be done on this Arogya Setu. This looks like a small, little, tiny monster sitting in our smartphones, so we don't know what is it doing exactly. But we need to be a little wary, but we don't need to be wary unnecessarily. But we still need to be vigilant about it. Surveys in countries like Singapore, where details about its citizens are given in public dashboard. Alibaba in China is also doing something with the same template. How do you think this modern surveillance is dangerous? This is dangerous because it doesn't allow us any kind of a private space. Of course, a typical Chinese will have a different understanding of what private space is all about than a typical Indian. So if some such thing is, Singapore and China can do this and get away with it, but I don't think this same thing can happen ever in India. And there will be a hue and cry, and already there is a hue and cry about many of these surveillance apps and technologies that are possibly being used by the governments and all that. So, but and yet some of those things are not yet being known. We don't even know in what ways we are being surveyed. But the moment, and this is not going to remain a secret forever, but the moment we get to know them, there will be a huge backlash against whoever has done this, or the government, or whatever. If there are certain ulterior political motives behind it, then of course there will be a huge, huge backlash. Okay. All right. Upasha, on a brighter note, robots can be used to do the mundane tasks related to garbage collection. Yes, segregation, which unfortunately even today are strictly reserved for a particular class and class of people. But to make it truly successful, we will have to ensure that we make good quality education and skill training accessible to all and create new employment opportunities. Yes, I completely agree with you, Upasha, and I will leave it at that. Unnati, if in this pandemic, in place of human nurses and helpers, we use robots, providing at least medicines and meals and other essential things to the infected person, it will help in preventing more and more medical practitioners from being infected, as robots will not die as humans do. Yes, I agree. So now how it can help more to in such pandemic, especially in hospitals, we really need some of these, this mundane work being done by others, or these helpers, as we call them, and all, and so even not just in a situation of pandemic, wherever there is a high risk of a communicable disease, for instance, we could use some of these robots for a daily and an engaged interaction with the patients. Somebody. Sir, AI has also been found to in patriarchal and regressive in many ways, found to be. For example, Alexa from Amazon, the culture of having a female assistant voice where the coding and programming are usually done by men. Yes, very nice point. Another example of invoking so-called feminine emotions in AI as Sophia, a robot in 1 month of her manufacture wanted to be a mother. I would like if you can give your views. Well, yes, and these are the other ways in which we have certain our specific cultured gender biases, encroaching into this whole scientific dialogue as to who is supposed to be an assistant or a companion, of which gender, and who is supposed to be doing the back end work, the more the more rigorous job and all that. That is one of the reasons why we think that even if you look at the kind of research grants that people get around the world, then you would see in science and technology, there is usually a bias for males getting more research grants than females. And that is happening with all this, also in humanities and social sciences to a large extent. Though in humanities, we still have come to a certain kind of a parity, but in sciences, there is no such parity. So there is an implicit bias there, as to who is to be called a scientist, who is doing all that, tough work, and who is supposed to be just an assistant. So that is a kind of that official, bureaucratic, scientific culture that we have all imbibed in some ways. And which is why, the courses like this and our discussions like this are very helpful. AKAG, sir, while we do talk about how AI can alter things, how about we also start pondering over how we have been articulating and studying human behavior up till now, and how both these two will interact with each other in the near future. Human behavior. While we say AI is going to alter a lot of things, however, our understanding of human behavior remains more or less same as before. Yes, good point. This is a good point. And I think even that is undergoing a certain amount of change. We are also adapting to our to the environment, which is becoming by degrees and at times by leaps and bounds much more complex than it ever was. So while we respond to a changing environment, we are also adapting in terms of behavior, and the environment also, acts on us. So even artificial intelligence will act on us in the near future. And so, and that goes back to one of the things that we were discussing in relation to the number one, 0-1 reading, where we say that we are not to be seen, we are not to see machines or merely as tools, that we are always shaping them. They are also shaping us. And that has become what we call the culture of technology, where humans and machines shape each other, or humans and science shape each other. Alpana, AI is being used enormously in agriculture also. Today, there is already disguised unemployment in agriculture, and after AI being deployed in these sectors, what kind of changes we'll have to face and how it will ethically impact that society and mainly farmers. I actually do not know much about this. You probably are right, and but I don't know much about those. Though I could say in the biotechnology field, like for instance in the production of genetically modified foods and all those things, yes, there is a large use of artificial intelligence. And also, once we gather a lot of the data about soil, climate conditions, and all of those things, AI has certainly a big amount of promise. And what you say makes sense and would be of immense significance for a country like ours, where the majority of the population are engaged with the agriculture sector. But Alpana, why don't you go ahead and do some research on this and come up? It's a real pity that some of you come up with such brilliant questions, and some of you, most of you, all of you, in fact. And it's a pity that I don't get to know you, individually. And I wish I could sit down and discuss more with you people at some point of time. Yes, we have another question. This is Harshita Gupta. In the digital age, the humans are no more humans, but cyborgs and machines. I mean, not yet, Harshita. We are, cyborgs will be a small subspecies of the humans, and machines are no more machines, but human, like AI. How far this made us insensitive towards each other, towards nature, and ultimately insensitive towards our own life, our own being as a human. Uh, we have not yet come to that point where we measure the degree of insensitivity, uh, whereby having lost a little of our humanity, we need to be characterized as in a black and white form as either sensitive or insensitive. That now we are rendered as thoroughly insensitive creatures. I don't think we have come to that point yet. Though the pandemic has revealed a lot about our insensitivity to fellow human beings. I don't know if you realize this or not. Uh, we are no longer bothered about what's going on in the lives of others, as long as we think that we are safe in the comfort zone of our own lockdowns, which only a few can afford. Not all can afford this kind of a lockdown, and yet we are very, very insensitive. In fact, and then some people try to explain this by saying that Indians, by and large, um, have have seen so much of poverty, suffering, and all that, that their nerves have become numbed. So we have numbed our senses, and because of that we have become insensitive to some of these things, because we have seen a lot of the suffering and the tragedies around us, in our families, around our families, in our neighborhoods, in our societies, happening to other people, to other castes, communities, groups, and so on, that we have become insensitive. Look at what happened in Delhi just before the pandemic. and we have become insensitive to that as well. So yes, so there are lots of these challenges. Yes, the last thing I wanted to point out was that, yeah, I went back to the book by Michael Sandel. There was a question by someone as to what you think, how would Sandel look at disability. Now, I found that Sandel uses one of those examples where he says that what if a pair of deaf parents choose to genetically engineer their child in such a way that the child also becomes deaf, because they claim that then that child fits into our culture of being equally deaf and we can communicate with that person very easily. Now, Michael Sandel doesn't take very kindly to this. He says that, we shouldn't be playing God, and life is a gift of God, and we shouldn't be doing it that, either making our children deaf or not deaf. We shouldn't be. In some ways, it was, somebody might reason, as you rightly raised that question. I don't recall who had raised it, but whoever has raised it, and you can see it from the chat of last classes, uh, was somewhere trying to ask this question very simply, that forget about the next birth or forget about the next generation and how we might tamper with the genes. But what about those who are disabled in this life now? What do we do? Shouldn't medical technology or advances in medical technology come to the help of the disabled? And what if we try to also go further on and try to save the future races with a little bit of that genetic tweaking, with a little bit of that gene therapy or gene editing? We get rid of some of these disabilities. What's wrong with that? Why in that case should we be seen to be to arrogating ourselves a role that says that we are playing God? So maybe we are just being humans, and we want to rid ourselves of some of the common human afflictions like these disabilities. But unfortunately, I don't think Sandel does it. So Sandel has a huge thing about is a critique of the deontological argument, and being a communitarian is also conservative. I somewhere felt that by talking about the gift of God and playing God and so on and so forth, he was somewhere saying that, let's not play around with these things. The solidarity is important. This community is important. It's not important what we do with our lives or what we can do with our lives, but how do we stick together as a community of connected human beings and so on, with some of those usual values and virtues. And even if somebody is born disabled, let him be. So there is a certain thing. There is a certain value about life itself, whether or not one is disabled. I thought somewhere he's talking like a priest, and his arguments are more or less theological. And I was a little amazed to go back to Sandel and see that his new utterances do not make any distinction between. He has gone too far the communitarian road, and now doesn't see any kind of a distinction between what counts as a theological argument and what counts as a political philosophy argument. I think he has just lost the plot in some ways, and especially in this particular book for sure. So I am done with this part, and depending on when next, and when do we get to know when the end semester exams are going to be, we will come back and reconnect. And if it is going to be held in the next semester, sometime in the next semester, I think we will have a lot of time. And I guess some of you will agree, and even if not all, but yeah. Okay, so Alpana, it was you who would ask the questions on Sandel, yes. Yeah, so I'm sure that some of you would want to reconnect back within the space that this course allows us. It's a real pity that we couldn't do this for the pandemic and all that. But in future, whenever we are re-engaging, I will take the class, and so don't worry. We can take more online classes. But let us wait until the exam schedule. And once that comes up, we will know how to pace ourselves out and what to do next. And maybe not go by the reading as such, but take up some interesting areas for discussion. And maybe have a few of you do the presentations in class also on the basis of some readings or on a particular issue, wherever you think. And given by all the questions that you have asked me, this is a smart course, but this course is made smart by smarter students like you. And I would like at some point of time to have a more engaged interaction with a few of you at least, if not all. So, anything else, Deves? Hari, are you around?
No, sir. Actually, I think he has gone for some medical treatment.
Oh, I see. Okay, okay. That's fine. That's fine. And so, may I leave now with your everyone's permission?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. And have a good holidays and a productive time. And yeah, well, look forward to connecting with you. I hope that this pandemic just vanishes and you come back to Delhi, wherever you are, and come back to to our common space. Uh, uh, the Department of Political Science. I want to see more of you. It's a real pity that yeah, we will. Anyway, so all right. Thanks a lot. And so I see a lot of those thanks messages. And yes, yes, Himansu, as a response to your question, can we mail you in case of help? Yes, of course. Please mail me. And let us keep each other busy during these COVID times. And yeah, let's keep ourselves busy. And I think I got two questions on the basis of last class, and I responded to them. Though I wish I could give you long responses, I could not. Because on any given day I have to respond to many mails, and so I try to type in as fast as possible. But thanks a lot, and look forward to more opportunities to connect. And yes, the retest, I will not give any more extension to this. Please bear with me. Let us be fair to all those who have written the internal assessment before. And you must also get the same amount of time. Let us not use this particular situation for our benefit. And ideally, I would have wanted. But I'm sure that please help the word reach around to spread the word that the retest deadline is 30th, and this is the retest is you have to write an essay for it. And I will not listen to anyone coming after that to say that, oh, they were never part of the WhatsApp group. They don't know how this came about and all that. So please, and in any case, the university, the department website tells you that you must get in touch with the teacher. And so far, I've only had 2 emails coming to me, but that's not a worry because Hari has actually helped us put together this list, and it's a very voluminous and a long list. So, thank you and goodbye.
Thanks, sir.
Goodbye. हो गया